Welcome to Code Voices in STEM, the podcast that highlights the experiences, challenges, and career stories of culturally and linguistically diverse women in STEM. Join us as we explore the stories of these inspiring women and learn more about the diverse contributions they are making to the world of science. Here is your host, Dr. Chloe Lim.
Hi everyone, this is Dr. Chloe Lim and you're listening to CALD Voices in STEM, a podcast that highlights the experience, challenges, and career stories of culturally and linguistically diverse women in STEM. I begin today by acknowledging the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people, the traditional custodians of the land on which we are meeting, and I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. I also extend my respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples joining us today and acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands and waters wherever you may be listening from. Their deep connection to the land, culture, and community enriches all of us and contributes greatly to the life of this country. In this season of CALD Voices in STEM podcast, I'm very excited to highlight Canberra women in STEM. And I'm honored to have Dr. Aparna Lal with me today as our podcast guest on this special podcast series. Dr. Aparna Lal is an associate professor of environmental epidemiology at the National Centre for Epidemiology and Population Health at the Australian National University. With an interdisciplinary background in environmental science, wildlife ecology, and public health, her research examines how environmental and social processes influence population health risks and identifies strategies to enhance health and well-being and promote environmental restoration. She has been awarded the 2020 Young Tall Poppy of the Year, 2023 ACT Emerging Scientist of the Year, and more recently, the 2024 Tony Ayers Prize for Excellence in Research in Translational Medicine. Growing up in a community where daily water supply was intermittent, and now as a mother of three, Aparna is passionate about addressing inequalities in access to clean water and mitigating the impact of climate change on health, particularly for children. A dedicated advocate for science, women in academia, and working mothers, she champions equity and representation in her field. Aparna envisions a healthier, more sustainable planet, striving to create a more equitable future. Welcome, Aparna, to the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me, Chloe.
Oh, thanks so much for saying yes to the podcast. I actually heard you speak at Iwin's workshop or symposium for women in STEM. And that was where I felt like, oh, I really need to get her on because I feel like you have so much to share and your story sounds so inspiring. So can you share a little bit more about your background and how you got into STEM?
Sure, Chloe. I don't really have a very traditional pathway into STEM, which is very interesting because obviously I'm Indian and I grew up in India. But my best subjects at school were things like English and geography and history, as opposed to the more traditional maths, physics, chemistry kind of things. But I absolutely loved being outdoors much of the time. I loved being in nature, much to my mother's disappointment. And I think growing up, I saw the natural environment around me changing and how that was impacting my lives, our lives. As you mentioned, I didn't grow up in an area where we had water 24 hours a day. It was just something that we built our lives around. We knew there would be water only for a few hours a day. So that's what we did. We all got the buckets together and we got everything together and we, you collect your water for different purposes, you store it. And it always struck me, even as a little child, that when there was a lot of rain, I lived in a cyclone-prone area in India. When there was a lot of rain, the water that we got was not clean, like it was quite muddy. And so making those connections very early on, I think, is what led me to where I am today. So not hugely STEM driven, but more curiosity driven and driven by what nature was telling me.
Yeah, no, I think our environment really does impact how we view the world and brings to mind the sort of problems that we want to solve, isn't it? So tell me more about, you've discovered this issue with, water around your community. And so how did that lead you to really getting into studying STEM?
Well, I think it drove me into studying things like wildlife ecology and environmental science as a first step, because that for me combined my love of being outside in nature with finding out the why. So why are the things that we see the way they are, and what is happening to them, and how do we explain them? And I think that's what then led me to my PhD in public health in New Zealand, where I actually looked at the intersection between environmental and social processes and how that was driving in a relatively, or I would say a very rich country like New Zealand, why are we still getting disease outbreaks in children that are associated with dirty water? What is driving that? And I think for me, the game changer was like, it's not just climate change, or it's not just biodiversity loss, or it's not just poverty. It's, if we are going to start thinking about solutions to these things, we actually need to think of it as an entire system and different parts of the system all impacting us and us impacting the system as well.
So tell me more about, I guess, the project that you did during your PhD, and how does that lead into what you're doing now?
Sure. So when I did my degrees in India in wildlife science, I spent a lot of time following my research project. Actually was on a small island in India, and I spent a lot of time following green turtles, and that was the first time where I was introduced to things like conflict between, conservation or conserving these big iconic species and human livelihoods and public health. And so who decides what's more important? Why are they mutually exclusive? And so for my PhD, again, I was looking at dairy farming in New Zealand, so looking at things like cows, and looking at how and when they contaminated waterways, and what were the processes that then led to that contaminated water coming into our drinking water systems and making kids ill. And so I think from all of the work that I've done in different countries, I think one of the big things I've learned is it's not, whether we're talking to farmers or whether we're talking to conservationists or even whether we're talking to fishermen or poachers, it's not about telling people don't do something. It's about, if your livelihood is at risk, what are the ways in which we can work together to minimize the impact on our health, but also not compromise your ability to support your family?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that would be a challenging thing to manage, isn't it? Because that's different stakeholders with different agendas and different needs and different values as well as to what they see is important too. So how did you navigate that?
Well, doing a PhD in public health is actually relatively easy, Chloe, because health is a shared value for everyone. It's slightly different when we talk about things like climate change. I think it's the language we use. I think everyone thinks that climate change is impacting their lives, but to acknowledge it and do something about it, if it's not in line with your values, I think we can still talk about action on climate change, but we need to be aware that people's values are different. And we need to come to a space where we can all be working towards solving climate change, cognizant of our different value systems, which I think we're not there yet.
Yeah, I think it's still quite a divisive issue, isn't it? Climate change, yeah. And so in your current work now, you're taking care of like courses as well at the ANU. You teach there too, is that right? And do you do and you're still doing research as well, is that right?
Yes, so I mainly do research at the moment.
Okay.
Because I'm on a ARC fellowship.
Oh, fantastic.
But I also, yes, I'm very lucky. I get to teach, which I think is really very interesting, because I find students very students today are far smarter than I ever was when I was at university.
I think somehow they seem to get so much knowledge, right? Yeah, I agree.
They do. And they have so much more information at their fingertips. And I also think the way we communicate as lecturers and students, I don't know about you, but like where I grew up, we just didn't have, like, there was quite a power hierarchy. It wasn't, we weren't equal. But here the students, I love engaging with them because they challenge you to think in different ways, and they don't take what you say as the gold standard. They'll be like, but why? Or have you thought about this? So it actually becomes a learning experience both ways.
Oh, that's fantastic. I think that's what we need, isn't it? Because that's the whole point of university, is not for students to just accept knowledge or accept whatever information that's been given, but to actually learn how to think critically around the information that is given, and to explore what other alternatives may be out there, or, really think differently, isn't it? Yeah, fantastic. Yes. So tell me more about the research you're doing now then.
So my research now has a big, broad focus on, I guess, environmental change more broadly. Because of my background in like wildlife ecology and environmental science, I look at the impacts of climate change, but I'm also looking at things like biodiversity loss, because one of my main research focuses is around infectious diseases that are spread from animals to humans. And so it's not just the fact that animals and humans are coming in closer contact with each other more often, but it's the fact that if you get really heavy rainfall, then all of the animal fecal matter and everything is just driven in one shot into human systems. And that's how we get things like outbreaks. And I guess one of the other impacts of climate change is around, as places get hotter and drier, wild animals themselves, it's been their natural habitat for hundreds and hundreds of years. But what's now happening is that they are shifting, looking for resources as well. And so that means that for a lot of them, they are now in places where they wouldn't normally be, and they're getting more in contact with humans. So how does the interaction between changes in biodiversity and changes in climate impact our ability to be well? And more importantly, I think my work is around not so much saying, well, here are the areas where there's a lot of risk, but it's like, what can we do to prevent this from happening? How do we prepare populations? Because a certain amount of climate change is going to happen. We've committed to it because of our actions. Similarly, there's a certain amount of biodiversity loss. So what do we need to do to prepare the populations and communities in these areas the best we can, so that we're not going to get a huge amount of illness?
And where is your work focused on?
I'm very lucky. I get to work in different areas. So I do work in Australia, but I also work in areas in the Pacific. And then during the pandemic, we worked in small gold mining communities in Indonesia. And so I get to work with some amazing, amazing communities. It's a huge privilege.
Oh, fantastic. And I'd be curious to understand how receptive are, I guess, the communities that you have worked with the work that you do. So how receptive they are they, because different communities will have different cultural expectations and different understanding of climate change. And so how have you found them to be, in terms of, you coming in and helping them with whatever it is that they want to achieve?
Yes, that's been a really good learning curve for not only me, but my team as well. Because a lot of working in communities is listening. You go in there and you just stop and listen to what they have to say, because whether we're talking about biodiversity loss or whether we're talking about climate change, it doesn't matter. These communities are already living with it. They've already adapted to it. So for us to come in and say, well, here's a whole new suite of things you need to do with resources that you don't have, I think is the wrong way to go about researching communities. I think it's about taking the knowledge that they already have and taking in many ways, upscaling the solutions that they already have in place, because they know that it works, it's culturally appropriate, it's culturally safe, and it's adapted to the local context. And in many of these communities, whether we're talking climate change adaptations, they don't work outside these communities because they're so culturally relevant and local and place-based. And I think that's how it needs to be. We need to stop going in there and telling everyone that here's what you should be doing, because they're already doing it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, people, I think, are very adaptable. Like they will, if they are facing a problem, then they try and understand how this problem is impacting their community, and how can we then develop a solution that actually fits with the community needs, isn't it? And I mean, it's great that you've got that approach of really listening first, and then seeing how then you can help them improve whatever systems that they have in place. So it's really, I think in any context, it's really understanding the cultural, what do you call it? The cultural aspects, I guess, or the cultural nuances in any context that you're trying to make changes, and then having to really adapt to that and being able to support them in that, isn't it? Yeah.
It is. I mean, I'll give you an example. In the small community we worked in Fiji, we went in and we gave them, so they have field toilets where they have these latrines that are attached to the ground. And then around that they've built, it's mainly made of cloth. They've just got like 4 cloth walls, but they don't have a washing area for after using the toilet over there. They sometimes have to walk a wee way to be able to wash their hands. And because there's no tap, and they actually have to use bottled water, like they have to go to the kitchen and get water. Sometimes they don't wash their hands at all. And so what we did is we gave them this little tap called a spa tap. And what you can do is it's made of silicone, it's yellow, and you attach it to like a 1 liter bottle. So you turn the bottle, you fill up the bottle with water, and then you turn it upside down, and then you add this little silicone thing to it. And you can hang it anywhere. So we just used to hang it outside their toilets. And when they come out, they just squeeze the silicone and then they wash their hands. And so it's really easy. It's really cheap. It's nothing. I think one of the big lessons for water interventions in resource limited communities is don't give them something that's expensive to maintain. Because many of these trials that we have give them, big toilets or big interventions, and which work really well for 5 years. But then they stop working, but there's no ability or technical capacity to actually keep them going. And so I guess in that way, this little tap thing, which can just be moved from bottle to bottle wherever you are, it was really useful. But on the flip side, Chloe, it was really interesting, because then we went back to the communities and we said, well, how is it working? And they said, well, it works really, really well. And as academics, we're all really happy about it. And then the lady, one of the main, she was the head of the community, she said, but it only works well for 6 months of the year. And so I was very surprised. I said, well, why doesn't it work for the other 6 months? She's like, because we don't have any water. So very context-based. So you can give them things, and then she's like, well, if you're going to give us these taps, I suggest that you also give us rainwater tanks so we can store the water, which is, a thing we never even thought about.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That's fantastic, isn't it? I mean, they actually came up with that solution too, didn't they?
That's right.
Oh my goodness. And I think that's the key thing, isn't it? Especially where, like you said, when a community has limited resources, we just need a solution that is simple and easy and very low to, little to no maintenance. Because I know that maintaining something takes so much work, and like you said, technical ability, whatever else not. I mean, I have to admit, I'm not very good with maintaining stuff at home myself. So I think it's just give me something easy and simple.
That's right.
That's fair.
And it shouldn't, I guess, for many of these communities as well, Chloe, it shouldn't be whether using it or whether maintaining it, can't take away from their normal lives. So it can't take time away from their normal lives, because then they won't do it. Because the other things like collecting water, fishing, taking the kids to school, all of that is essential. So if we're asking them to do something that's going to take time away from essential things, then they're never going to do it. Because they have to do it.
Yes, I know. It's a habit, isn't it? It's a habit they have to build into in order to do something, right? So, yeah, unless you want to change the habits around that. But I think that's a harder thing to do. Yeah. Oh, that sounds like such an amazing project. So, I mean, tell me more about a project or an achievement that you're particularly proud of in your STEM career.
I would say, I think one of the things that I'm proudest of is it's an award that I've created at the ANU with philanthropic support. I think one of the reasons I'm so proud of it is because it's allowed me to see when science is bigger than just me. So it's an annual award that's given out to an early career academic, and it gives them enough funding for a whole year of research where they can just go out and do whatever research they want to do. And it will be a pilot study for the next step in their career, whatever it may be. So I think as an academic, for me, like being able to contribute to build the next generation of science leaders, I think that will be my proudest achievement. I love it. And the breadth of the science that we get, like in the applications, is amazing. We get from social psychologists to clinicians to medical anthropologists to engineers. Everyone applies for this award. It's really very amazing. I love it.
Oh, fantastic. So when did that award start?
It's been going for 3 years now. So 2025 will be the 4th year. And so far we've had 5 scholars.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic.
So yeah, it's very, it's something we're really excited about.
Oh no, that sounds like a huge achievement. I think that especially as an early career researcher, because having that extra funding to be able to do any research, really any topic, I think there's so much freedom, intellectual freedom for someone to be able to explore and hopefully get some initial results so that then they can apply for future grants, isn't it? Yeah.
Exactly. Because I do think that's a huge risk in today's science world, is that we're just not building that ladder as well as we should. It's quite top heavy at the moment. And what we're doing is we're also encouraging a lot of people to do PhDs more and more, but then we just don't have a pipeline for them to accelerate. We don't have a pipeline for them to be promoted and to build the careers that they want to build coming into a PhD, which I think is a huge risk.
Yeah, no, I mean, when I was working in medical research before, as an ECR or early career researcher, I found that there was not a lot of fellowships or grants available, or if there are, they're very competitive as well. And so I feel like, there's this, you have a lot of PhDs at the bottom here, but then they all funnel through this really tiny hole in order to get to the top.
That's
And
right.
it's really not the way that we want to set up the system, right? We want to encourage all those PhD trained people to go into academic research if that's something that they want to do.
Yes. And I completely agree with you. It's like that bottleneck, right? Like they get into, and I think it's especially hard for women because it coincides perfectly with the time that we might want to have families, or we might want to have something outside, a life outside research.
Yeah, and speaking of that, I guess were there any specific challenges that you have faced, either as a woman in STEM or a working mom in STEM or a culturally diverse in STEM, whichever experience that you may have encountered before?
I don't know if there's been a few things, but the first one that I'd like to talk about, I don't think it's specific to being culturally diverse. And I think one of the good things that's happened post-COVID is that industry, academia, government, we've all become far more open to people working from home and flexible working hours. I really think that's a game changer for mums. I mean, being an academic, my time was always flexible as long as I got the work done. But that's not the case for many others. You have to be there from 9 to 5. And I think now with COVID, people are beginning to realize that your efficiency and your productivity is not directly linked to the amount of hours you are in the office. And I think that's made a huge change to lots of people. I think that's a really good change. And I guess the other challenge, I wouldn't say it's a challenge, it was a challenge, but now I've accepted it. I do believe it's one of my strengths, is I was always seen as the quiet personality. In meetings, you don't feel the need to talk constantly. And I think what I found challenging is there was a perception of equating being quiet with being disengaged. And I think we need to be really careful about that, because and I'm not saying this because it's my personality type and it's not something I can change, but I think quiet leaders are few and far between, and we need more of those. We need more considered decisions. We need people to process all the information. And for some people, that's happened on the go. But for many others, it doesn't. And I think I've only now come to the point where if someone says, oh, what did you think of that? I'm actually able to say, I need time to process it and I can come back to you. And I think that in itself was a challenge for me. And I still struggle with it, because there will always be people in meetings where they have an opinion about everything, which is totally fine, but they must voice that opinion. And it's always a clash between, well, should I say something now? And is it going, but I've reached the point in my career where I'm like, well, I could say something now because it's a little bit annoying, but it's not useful, so don't say it. I'd rather process and take it away and come back with something useful. But it's something I certainly struggle with.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a challenge with a lot of women who probably come from Asian backgrounds, because we've been taught not to speak up or challenge authority. And I think our style of leadership is quite different from the Western style of leadership, where people are expected to be, how to say, very vocal, and, are always speaking up. But we do have to keep in mind there are different leadership styles. And, like you said, there might be leaders who are more on the quiet side, but that doesn't mean that they do not have the leadership qualities. Yes. It's just that they approach it differently. And, there's, I'm sort of doing some work around the CALD employment strategy in the department. Okay. And just looking at some of the papers on I guess the challenges that people have around promotions or career progression. And a lot of times it's that misconception of how people are viewed and whether they fit that traditional or classic leadership look or yes. That sort of thing. And so I think it's really we need to, I guess, be educated in some ways, or increase that awareness of the different leadership styles, and to think of what are the other things that we can be looking for in a person, so that we can consider them, if in the first place, even think of someone that they could potentially be a leader, and then how can we then allow them to really shine as a leader, but still letting them be their authentic self. And I think that's a challenge that it's a challenge that we kind of still working through right now. But I think having that awareness and understanding that, just because you're quiet doesn't mean that you're not leadership material is an important point to bring up.
I think so. Yeah, I agree with you. Is there anything in the work that you're doing with the department that that surprised you or that you didn't know about?
No, nothing too I think nothing too dramatic in that sense. But there is a paper called Modeling Australian Public Service Careers, which has a lot of information because they did some research into what they call it non-English speaking background people, and to look at the rates of promotion. And what you see is that people from those non-English speaking backgrounds, the opportunity for being promoted becomes less the higher the seniority is. And so I guess we've got data to show that there is a problem with this. But what I found that was interesting was, let's say if you were born in Australia and you clearly have that language, right? You'll be speaking with an Australian accent, but somehow that did not actually work to their favor. So it seems to be, it's not a language thing, but it could be something as superficial as how you look and perhaps your name. I know that the name is an issue. Definitely, if you have you don't have an Anglo-sounding name, then you're less likely to be called for an interview. But apparently, even if you speak, good Australian English, and you're Asian, and that still disadvantages you. So I think that I thought was an interesting thing. I'll put the link to the paper anyway, so that people can have a look. But I thought that was an interesting point. So it's not a matter of your accent really. It's something beyond that. Yeah. So there's definitely systemic issues that needs to be addressed.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. So like you've talked about, that quiet leadership, and do you think there's something that, that needs to happen within the STEM industry, within your industry in particular, to sort of create more opportunities for women in STEM?
That is a good question, Chloe. I think can I share something that I've seen that's not just in academia, but more broadly?
Of course.
In terms of, I think we need a systemic shift across. It's not just applicable to academia. But I think one of the things I struggle with at the moment is this it seems to be a very clear line between a lot of people that have privilege, for example, shouldn't be, in my view, shouldn't be feeling guilty about the privilege that they have. It's about what can you do with that privilege going forward. And for me, I see a lot of people who come from a background of huge privilege not being as authentic as they can be because they're scared and guilty about all of the opportunities they've had. But for me, in my view, that's exactly who we need. We need these people because they have privilege, because they have opportunity, they have agency, they have a platform. These are the people that need to be able to create space for those that don't. I think the problem is when some of these people try and talk about experiences they've never had. I think that is the problem. I think in my view, what I think needs to happen more is that use your position, use your privilege to create a space for someone else's voice and for them to step up and tell people about their experiences, because they won't have the agency to do so, but you do. So sometimes leadership, I think, is about stepping back and not just stepping up all the time. It's about stepping back and amplifying other people's voice, but through their own voices, not yours, because I think that's where the layer of authenticity kind of falls away. Like, I think own your privilege, just as, you own your culture. It is a strength, and just what you do with it going forward, I think, is going to be much more important than feeling guilty about why you had it in the past.
Yeah, that's a very important point. And I think, it's it's like you said, I think especially for those who don't have a voice, right, or they don't know how to go about things, but if you have the resources, like you said, if you have the platform, then you can use that to help elevate others, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, and we do need to, I think, increase that awareness. Is like, instead of feeling guilty, just do something about it.
Yes.
And what can you do? You can open up the doors for other people.
Yes.
Give them the microphone.
Give them the microphone. That's
Yes.
right. Because it will look tokenistic if someone who's never had that experience talks about it, right?
Mm. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's not what they have experienced. It's not their lived experience. I don't think you can really understand
No,
and be able to share, like you say, authentically. Yeah, and people can sense that as well when you're not being genuine about your sharing or your story.
that's
So,
right.
but yeah, for someone to just give someone else to share their stories, it's like it's similar to, I guess, my platform here in the sense that it's just giving other people the opportunity to share that story. Because
Yes.
as much as I would like to tell that story from my perspective, I won't be able to tell it as well as you do. Yeah, well, that's so amazing. I mean, you've done such amazing work, in your research and also in creating opportunities for other people as well. I know that there'll be lots of other girls and women in STEM who'll be interested to know about, studying in STEM or developing a career in STEM. So, what is the one key advice that you would give to them?
Um, I think if I had to give really young girls some advice, I would say don't worry if you don't still know what you want to do. You don't have to have it set in stone when you're 10 or 11. Like, it was only at university that I clicked and said, oh, this is actually what I want to do for the rest of my life. Um, and for, I think, early career academics or even, postdocs or in the field where I work, for people coming from overseas into their first postdoc, I think if someone had given me this advice, it would have helped me. Just, I think, own your culture, own your identity. It is an absolute strength that you bring. You don't need to fit in. You just need to be who you are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think those are fantastic, fantastic advice. We feel like we need to know everything, isn't it? And know what is the next step. It's like, what's my next 5, 10 year plan? Yeah, we need to know it now. I don't actually fully know myself, but even at this age. Oh, but I think I know I faced the challenge of wanting to assimilate so much when I moved overseas that I think I didn't really think of it that much until, I'm much older and I realized, no, this is who I am, this is how I sound like, and, this is how I
Yes,
look like.
that's right.
Accept me for who am I, who I am.
Yes. What was your biggest challenge when you moved here first?
Oh, for me, it was actually academic. So I left Malaysia. So I was born and raised in Malaysia. I left for university and I studied in New Zealand. Actually, I did study in New Zealand in Wellington. And my main challenge was actually to do with academic because I was so used to the education system back home where it's very much rote learning and memorization, not a lot of critical thinking skills as much. But then when you get to university, and I guess this circles back to what you were saying about, the students being so curious and really questioning things, is that I'm like, oh, I don't actually do that so much. And so I had to change my mindset, change my thinking around that. So that was a challenge for me that I had to really overcome. Yeah, because I mean I'm a high achiever at heart, and then when I had all these challenges, then my grades started to slip. I'm like, I'm no longer an A student, but but that was hard. That actually impacted my identity and my ability as well. I felt like I wasn't as smart or as intelligent as I think I should be. But after time, over time, you're like, no, it's okay. You don't need to know everything, and you cannot know everything. So
I still don't know everything.
yeah, no, there's so much stuff to learn. Like, it's never ending. And I think that's the amazing thing about our world and the world we live is there's always so much to learn from and we're always finding new things too. And I think that's a the key thing for me is to encourage that curiosity and that
Yes.
lifelong learning in people, so that that they don't feel like they've accomplished or they achieved something, or they become ignorant because they think they know everything already. So yeah, no, thank you so much, Aparna, for sharing your stories and insights with us today. We've heard about your story of how you got started in STEM by just looking around you and seeing how water is being used, or the lack of it, and then being able to create an award, for early career researchers. I think that's so amazing. That's one of my goals, is create something where I can just give people money. Isn't that great? And then to hear about some of the challenges that you face, being a quiet leader, and that not that being a quiet leader is not necessarily a bad thing, really. And I think we need to change mindsets around what leadership looks like. And finally, thanks for your advice as well. I think being culturally diverse means we have that unique lived experience and the unique culture and background that we can bring in to contribute to the diversity in the workplace. And we know research have shown that it makes the workplace more productive, and it works better when there's
Yes.
people of diverse backgrounds. So thanks so much for all of that.
Thank
So
you.
now, can you tell us how people can connect with you?
Sure. I'm very happy to be contacted via email.
Hmm.
So I'm based at the ANU, so it's just aparna.lal@ANU. But I'm happy for you to put it in your little blurb as well.
Fantastic. No, that would be great. So thanks again for sharing. And I really appreciate our conversation today. I think I've learned quite a few things, and I hope that our listeners will be able to pick up quite a few great nuggets from your story as well. So thanks again, Aparna.
Thank you so much, Chloe, for having me.
We've reached the end of our show, so thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others or leave a rating and review. If you have any questions about the things we covered in the show, or would like to follow my projects, please find me on Instagram and LinkedIn. Thanks for tuning in today, and I'll see you at the next episode.
Thanks for listening to the Cold Voices in STEM podcast. Get the show notes, links, and resources from today's episode by visiting drchloelim.com.